Hello and welcome to Learn Law with Hannah. So this is week 4 of the Lucy Letby trial, week 4 of potentially 6 months, so 26 weeks. Quite a complicated week in terms of evidence and medical evidence, so please bear with me. I am not a medical expert, so I'm sure there are some things that may not be fully explained or fully developed, but I welcome all of your feedback and comments. Okay, so what happened this week? Remember, we're still on the prosecution's case, so they are still calling their witnesses, and then the defence will cross-examine those witnesses. So we're looking at the death of child C. Now, you've got doctors and nurses this week recalling things that happened in 2015, so that is 7 years ago, which must be incredibly difficult. You're not going to remember what you were doing 7 years ago. Child C died and the death was deemed to be very unusual. So the nurse had concerns during the shift about respiratory distress, and child C had begun grunting. And at 11:15 p.m. On that date in the summer, child C collapsed, and 2 nurses used a neopuff device, which I think is trying to inflate the lungs. The nurse who gave evidence couldn't remember when Lucy Letby had entered the room, and it soon became clear that child C was going to die. Lucy Letby was told not to go into the family room where the family were, because they were clearly starting to become very distressed. However, she did go into that room despite being told several times that she was not allowed to. The nurse admits that the baby, child C, was born weighing approximately 800 grams, which is under 2 pounds. And with a baby that small, there is a risk of death. The doctor gave evidence later on that day and said that they suspected sepsis and jaundice, which apparently is common in premature babies, and there was nothing too worrying. I mean, child C is very unwell, but they were not unduly concerned. So they tried to, when child C became more unwell, they tried to intubate child C and couldn't due to the swollen vocal cords. So they then had to perform a lot of resuscitation attempts, and this went on for about 40 minutes, which is longer than normal. And then, rather unusually, the heart and lungs restarted, and they couldn't understand why. So later on, child C had been, they questioned another doctor in court, and child C had been producing dark bile, which raises some concerns. They also said there was an intestinal blockage, possibly because of the bile. But because the bile and the dark bile hadn't increased, then they were not unduly concerned. So child C, before the collapse, had not been getting worse. Child C had also developed pneumonia, which they felt was under control. And the doctor said the pneumonia did not kill child C, but child C died with pneumonia. Now, the issue is the air in the stomach. The defence KC has accused the expert witness doctor of making things up, because there was no mention in the report from when the expert looked at the case of air in the stomach. Another doctor spoke in court and talked about the X-ray that was given on child C, and said the nasogastric tube was very high and not in an ideal position. So this very unwell baby had started to get better, and there was a lot of evidence about how babies don't just suddenly collapse, how there always is some warning before they do so. Now, Lucy Letby had apparently only been involved with the resuscitation of child C. She did search for the parents on Facebook. She was very keen to get back into the ICU unit so that she could she said it was because it's traumatic, and it helps to get straight back in after a child has died, and she found the death very hard. So she is being accused of murdering child C via air in the nasogastric tube. So on Thursday, they started focusing on child D. So child D was a baby girl who died. And so Lucy Letby has been charged with the murder of child D. Again, it's to do with air. So the mother of child D gave evidence in court and said the staff were very busy. It was all very delayed. She had blood after her waters broke, but she wasn't looked at for a long time. So they had to perform a C-section. When child D was born, child D was limp and pale, and child D became worse and became more unwell. The mother said that she noticed Lucy Letby hovering around with a clipboard and asked her to go away. So child D required ventilation. Child D suffered from jaundice. Lucy Letby was on duty later that night when child D became unwell. Child D collapsed at 1:30 in the morning and eventually died. And Lucy Letby sent a text message to her colleague in the morning saying that she'd had a rubbish night, that her job or their job was far too sad, and had said that the rash looked like sepsis. In the evening, Lucy Letby searched for the parents on Facebook and also messaged her colleague again to say that she had been crying. On Friday, this week of the trial, a senior nurse gave some evidence about how child D had been stable, but later this nurse had noticed discoloration and a rash, which was highly unusual, and they hadn't seen anything like this in over 20 years. And then child D unfortunately stopped breathing and they needed to resuscitate child D. The nurse was also questioned by the defence Casey about the fact that the hospital was understaffed and how it's a requirement that you have one nurse looking after one baby. So there was the inference here that perhaps it was a fault of the hospital as opposed to Lucy Letby. So that was the end of week 4 and the trial continues next week. If you haven't done already, please click like, click subscribe, and I will see you soon.